I'm going to make 3 lunches. While Ashley is herding cats, right? Getting people into outfits and finding socks and shoes. And we drive together. Our whole family drops the kids off at school. At about somewhere between 8 and 8:10, I'm going to get 3 hugs, and so is my wife. It's our family rhythm. We do it every day of the working week. Always do that. Every night. If you find me around 7:30, you're going to find me lying on the floor in my boy's bedroom, and I'm going to have a book. Right lately, it's been Hank the Cowdog. Which, incidentally, if you've never read Hank the Cowdog, I am sad about your weak literature experiences. Because Hank the Cowdog's awesome, man. Right now, he's in danger of being put to death because he was caught because his sister, who secretly hates him, Hank can't figure that out, fed him a bar of soap, and the dog had thought he had rabies. Best stories ever, But if you come looking for me at 7:30, that's where you're going to find me. I live in that habit. I live in that rhythm. And then after the kids are in bed, maybe Ash and I will catch some TV. Maybe we'll watch an hour of television. We live in that habit. We live in that rhythm. And our life kind of gets dense in it, doesn't it? Our life will get a dent, a reservoir where we just keep going back to again and again and again and again. Now listen, that's normal. That's human. I'm not here saying that's bad. I'm saying look at your dent. Look at your rhythm. Pay attention to what it's like. And how does the rhythm of your life serve your faith? Or how does the rhythm of your life keep you connected to God? Does it? I mean, partly you have a rhythm of life of coming here, right? Anybody ever miss church and feel weird? You're on a journey or something and you can't make it, and maybe you can't find a church where you are, and it just feels wrong. Or you're sick, you're throwing up, and so you're like, maybe I have to stay home. Let me tell you, you ought to stay home. I don't want to do that. But don't share. But you say, and you miss it, and you're like, man, I didn't take the supper. When I was in graduate school, I went for about 3.5 months, and I missed Sunday morning worship every single week. I was working to support myself at a bookstore. And at that bookstore, everybody there was Christian. And we finally hired a non-Christian. But I mean, it was Searcy, Arkansas. It's a Christian town. Finding a non-Christian is kind of tough, So I'm working at this bookstore, and my thought was, well, if I say, no, I won't work on Sunday morning, that means somebody else is going to miss worship. So I'll be willing to work on Sunday morning. Surely someone else will get in a rhythm with me, and I'll be able to do, I'll miss church once every, third week or something like that. I'll go on Sunday night, I'll take the Lord's Supper. And so I was willing to do it. Nobody else was. And for 3 months, I worshiped only on Sunday evenings. The way they did the Lord's Supper on Sunday evenings at the church where I was worshiping, they had like the shame walk, right? The perp walk, right? Because to get to the classrooms, you had to go through a door like this from the building, right? So you had to walk, they said, if you need the Lord's Supper, it's been prepared down this hallway, and you can go while we sing our last song. And so you're walking up, and people are glaring at you. And you're like, yes, I didn't have it. I didn't. I know. I'm a bad Christian. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. And I'll not do it next week, except that I will because this is my job. Man, it was awful. It was a terrible experience. But you know what? What was really a terrible experience was to have a bad life rhythm. And I noticed after about 3 months, I went to my boss. I said, either this changes or I quit. And I don't have another job lined up, but I can't do this anymore. Because what I noticed is that my anger was growing. And my lust was growing. And things that weren't of God were growing. I was a graduate student at Harding Graduate School of Religion. I was getting my master's degrees. I was studying about God all the time. But because I lacked a life rhythm that had kept me worshiping in a way that wasn't filled with shame and guilt, because I wasn't doing that, I wasn't connecting to God correctly. And I found that my discipleship began to suffer. And I began to look at myself and say, this is not okay. I need to correct my life rhythm. So I went in and I told him, I'm going to quit. He found a non-Christian. Had them open on Sundays. And I thought, I don't like that solution. I really don't, because that means that someone else is forbidden church so that I can go. But I thought, I don't know what to do because I can't keep doing this. Because our life rhythms give us life. They're how we live. And they're how we tell our stories. You know that? You organize your life according to a story. We're thinking right now about family life. How do we live as a Christian family? And how does living a Christian family look different from that family out there that isn't engaged with the story of Christ? You know, because I suspect that you could find many families that in the morning they make 3 lunches. And in the evening they read to their kids. They read Hank the Cowdog. You know, so how am I different? Then maybe after the kids are in bed I might catch Doctor Who. So might they. So how am I different? How do we live our life differently? And if only there were somewhere I could find some guidance that would lead me to think about how I live my life. If only, oh God, maybe you helped me out. This morning, if you've got your Bibles, open up to Deuteronomy chapter 16. I'm not going to have it projected up here. So if you want to be able to look at this, have a look. Because what God is going to do in Deuteronomy 16 is He's going to directly address your life rhythms. I'm not going to have you turn there, but actually the first place to look, I would suggest, is actually Deuteronomy 5. I mean, if you want it, you can. You can probably find 16 after you look at 5. But in Deuteronomy chapter 5 is where God sets the basic life rhythm, the weekly heartbeat for Israel, and that is Sabbath. God sees to it that they have a dent in their life. He makes sure that that dent is deep. In fact, He doesn't do it in Deuteronomy. But what is the penalty for not keeping Sabbath? Do you remember? What happens if you don't keep Sabbath? That's right, we kill you. That was the penalty for not keeping Sabbath in Israel. It was a death penalty crime. Seems like maybe God's a little serious about this life rhythm thing, don't you think? Kind of important to Him. I think He really, really, really means it. Now, what was Sabbath about? Sabbath, the purpose of Sabbath, what it was you didn't work, right? And if you look in Deuteronomy 5, there's an extensive list of who shouldn't work, just to make sure that He gets the point across that it's nobody in your house. Your house isn't like that house. You live differently in your house than that house. You don't work one day a week. They think they're human doings. But you're going to take one day a week and remind yourself that you're not a human doing. You don't base your value on what you do. You are a human being. Your value and your worth comes from your existence. Your existence to bear the image of God. You're going to interrupt the flow of your life once a week and stop making money. You're going to stop working one day a week. But what do you do during that one day a week? Well, if you look in Deuteronomy chapter 5, He's going to say you're going to spend time remembering. You remember that you were a slave in Israel. Now, folks, that's shorthand for something. And in fact, it's not shorthand in Deuteronomy 5. But it's shorthand for the story. You were a slave in Israel, and God rescued you. Or not in Israel, in Egypt. You were a slave in Egypt, and God rescued you from Egypt. What was life like in Egypt for the Hebrews? It was continuous work. It was uninterrupted, continuous work. And when someone came and said, you know what, you ought to let them go, the work got harder. They took it with a straw. Keep making the bricks, no straw. Get your own straw. And so there were human doings there. And he's going to say, no. One day a week, you remember that I rescued you. One day a week, you remember your redemption. One day a week, you stop everything else, and you take time to focus on the story of God. And you remember your rescue. That's Old Testament stuff, though. We don't do Sabbath anymore. Where are you right now? Where are you? And what are you doing? I've heard people get real upset about church attendance, and they come down and condemn people. I actually heard a sermon one time based on Hebrews chapter 13 that said, if you aren't, if you're off fishing when the Lord comes back, guess what? You're going to hell. If it's a Sunday and you're out fishing, you're going to hell. I remember going, oh, dude, that is not what Hebrews 13 says. That's crazy. And I've reacted against that perspective and gone, no, he's not up there with a checklist. But I think that whole perspective misses the whole point. The point of regular worship attendance, of coming here again and again and again, is that the remembering does something to the other 6 days. You live your life in this rhythm so that you will be different. So that your family will be different. You come here again and again and again, and it reminds you, parents, that in your parenting needs to be marked by the presence of Christ. And so you need to live as a disciple when you parent. You come here again and again and again, kids, so that you can remember that when you go to high school, you live differently. You aren't like them. You've been bought with a price. You're not your own. And so you live differently there than you would if you didn't come here. We live in this regular life rhythm because we are human and human beings forget. We forget. That's why I said on the screen, do this in remembrance of me. Actually, I said this, do, in remembrance of me. Thank you, King James. We do this to remember. So that we will live differently, marked by the remembrance. That's what the Sabbath life rhythm was about. The Pharisees made it about keeping a rule. And they missed the whole point. That's why they were constantly fighting with Jesus. Because Jesus was saying, man's made for the Sabbath, not the Sabbath for man. Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. The Sabbath is not the important thing. Your humanity is. You live coming to church and bringing your family to church so that you will be a churched family. Now, skip over to Deuteronomy chapter 16. The next thing that he's going to suggest, I think, is to use your calendar. Use your holidays. Live your life in a life rhythm of having seasons where you pay attention. In Deuteronomy chapter 16, there are 3 of these holidays. There's more of them. I think there would be 7 big festivals. But there are 3 big festivals where they were supposed to make a journey to Jerusalem. They were pilgrimage festivals. And you want to talk about interrupting life. These things interrupt your life. Because your life rhythms will get settled down. And things will come into those life rhythms and say, I'm most important. Sports will come along and say, if you want to play, if you want to start, you're going to be at this practice. Well, that practice is on Wednesday. And my family's a church family, and we go to church on Wednesday. You want to start or not? And suddenly you got to choose which life rhythm is going to dictate your life. But these holidays, man, they do more than that. They flip over the whole apple cart. You're going to be here. No, I'm not. Because I'm going to make the journey all the way down to Jerusalem. That's what God is telling the Jews. He's saying 3 times a year you're making a trip. If you live far away, you're making a long trip. And these 3 festivals, what do? What is their purpose? What is their point? Well, just like Sabbath, they tell a story. That's what they do. You get to the holiday and you focus on a story. The first one he talks about is the redemption story, Passover. Passover is an amazing meal. When we look at that and we think, if you think about it at all, you think of it as a kind of a national holiday for Israel. Folks, it's a family life event. Because at its heart, Passover is a meal. Well, how does it work? Well, for the week beforehand, you got to get all the leaven out of your house. I've actually heard a Messianic Jew talk about this, and all the pomp and circumstance related to getting the leaven out. You spend an entire week and search through your house and make sure you got all the leaven. And the wife makes sure that she leaves one small pile of leaven somewhere in the kitchen cabinets for her husband to find. Now, she's gone through, she's cleaned the entire house. Because there might be leaven that got spilled in the bathroom and it can't be there. So she has washed and scrubbed with bleach everywhere. She leaves one small pile. Make sure it's a big, conspicuous pile, right? And he comes along, he finds that pile, and he sweeps it into a handkerchief, takes it outside, burns it, and then he declares the house clean. And she's going, yeah, it's clean all right, And so they spend a week and they don't eat any leaven at all. And then they have the meal. The meal that remembers the moment of redemption. They gather and they sit down and everything on that table tells the story. Everything does. When they sit down, the youngest member of the family will say 4 questions. I'm not going to ask all 4 of them, but they all have to do with what are they eating and how are they eating it. Like, usually we eat bread or matzah, but today it's just matzah. Or usually we don't dip stuff in salt water, and today we do that twice. Or usually we eat sitting in chairs, but now we're reclining, we're ready to go, we're dressed differently. What's going on? What is this about? And then the father in the house will talk his way around the table and tell the story based on the food that's there. So the whole point of the whole thing is to tell the story of God. That's the whole point of it. So you interrupt the flow of your life to think about God. That's what Passover does. What about Pentecost? Well, Pentecost is actually, it's a 50-day thing, and it starts when? When your sickle first hits the grain. So as harvest first begins, that's when you start counting. And you count 50 days from then to the feast. Now, what is that? Well, it's a harvest festival. That's what it is. But how does that work? Well, out there in the world, you always use magic beforehand so that you convince the gods to give you a crop. God's going to say, no. You celebrate at the end. And you don't celebrate when the crops are out there. You wait until you get them all in your house. You bring them all in, you put them all in your barn, in your storage facility. You gather it all. And then you celebrate. And when you celebrate, you look at what you've got, and you say, okay, based on this, I ought to give this much to God. Now, what's that 50 days going to be like? During that 50 days of collecting this stuff in, first of all, you're probably going, okay, this is what next year's food's going to be like. Are we going to have enough, or is it going to be kind of a lean year? Am I going to stay fat, or am I going to get real thin? That's one thing that's going on. But the other thing that God has done is that the entire harvest cycle has become a time of thinking about God. All of it. The whole time they're gathering it in, they're taking stock of what the Lord has done for them. They're looking at it saying, what do I have to be grateful for? How can I be thankful? And it's shaping their hearts to be grateful within the land that the Lord their God has given them. So again, the whole focus is time to think about God. Let me ask you, what would your life be like if, beginning October 1, you spent all of October and right up to Thanksgiving Day, you spent that whole time taking stock of how the year's been and how the Lord has blessed you. The entire time. You spent the whole time saying, well, how can I afford to be generous? What good thing can I do this year at Thanksgiving? I'm going to spend the entire time headed for that. You see what that would do to you? Extended time thinking about God. That's what God's planning for their life for them to be. The last one is the festival of Booths. I always pronounce that one very, very carefully so that no one thinks it's a festival where we get drunk or something. And during the festival of Booths, or tabernacles, okay, what did they do? Well, they spent a week camping. This is in the late fall, and the father of the house, it's his job to go out and build a tent. Right? You have a tent in your backyard, and you spend the entire time out there. And why do they do that? Well, this was set up to remember the wandering. To remember that God was faithful to us for 40 years. What do you do when you're living out in a tent? Well, you've interrupted your life in a very big way, right? Usually you live in a house, but tonight you're going to sleep in the cold. And you're going to make sure that the fire is tended. And while that fire is burning, what are you doing? We are talking about the story of God. Because why are we sleeping out here? My bed's so much softer and there are no roots in it. So why are we out here, Dad? And you're telling the story, and it's a story that tells you what humanity's like. It's got a very negative anthropology. We spent 40 years wandering in the desert, living in tents like these, when we could have already been in houses, but we weren't faithful. And so God wants to remind us of what we are like as human beings when we go alone. So we come out here into the tents, and we live in the tents, and we remember that in and of ourselves there's nothing great in us. We're failures, we're broken, we're a mess. And yet, at the same time, it's a story of God's great faithfulness. Because like they're talking about back there, He fed them quail. He fed them manna. They ate when there was no food. They drank water that came from flinty rocks. They lived in desert places, and God saw to it that He cared for them. And so they stop, and for a week, they tell the story. If you look over in Deuteronomy chapter 31, every seventh year, when they're doing this festival, they read the entire book of Deuteronomy to their family. Every seventh year, they take a week during this camping trip. And to be honest with you, I think this is one of the coolest things about God. He mandates camping. I love that. What an awesome God, right? But during that camping trip, they have to read the entire law to their family. It's an interruption of life to make sure that we pay attention. And what is all of it about? It's about looking at the great things that God has done. So think over your calendar and think about how are you living together with your family where you pay attention to what God has done. Obviously, if you're a church family, you do this. But you've got Deuteronomy 5 mastered. Good. But what are you doing about Deuteronomy chapter 16? What are you doing? In our fellowship, and I say this with some trepidation because I know I'm about to step on some landmines, but I'm going to do it anyway. A good preacher is willing to dance on the landmines because we believe in resurrection. In our fellowship, we have often been hostile to church calendar and to church holidays, like Christmas. Christmas, we are hostile to that, traditionally, in churches of Christ. And we actually have reason. It's not an obnoxious hostility that some people paint it as. There's reason for it. We have no idea when the Lord was born, and He hasn't told us. And so that was, set up by people who were trying to be missional and going out to people who worshiped at winter solstice and saying, you want to give gifts to people? Let's celebrate the real gift. So this is what we'll celebrate here. I understand the hostility to it. And after all, Catholics do that. We don't want to be Catholic. You know, Catholics pray. I'm not willing to let them take that away from me just because they do that. And I think maybe I'm going to pay attention to Christmas. In fact, my family, we celebrate Advent. Advent begins December 1 and it goes all the way up to December 25. I'm not telling you to do that. I'm telling you what my family does. And at the table, every night of that month, we read a scripture about the birth of Christ. And together we talk about it as a family. It takes discipline to do it. It's hard to do. We didn't do this year. We're moving. We're in flux. It's hard to do. But we are intentional about doing it. Now that I've walked out on the limb and sawed off a little bit of it, I'll just go ahead and cut the rest of it off. You know what season we're in right now? Did I hear Lent? You know, now that is way Catholic, Lent is. You know? And quite honestly, I object to some of the theological underpinnings of at least the way it's practiced in folk Catholicism. Because a lot of it, the way it is practiced, is to say, well, you know, if I mortify the flesh long enough, God will be pleased with me. You know, so I spend a week in penance. I gotta fast and give something up for Lent, and I'm gonna, and then on Sunday maybe I can have it back. But you know what? I'm going to scrap all of that, and I'm going to say an extended period of time where I head into Easter, and I spend the whole time thinking about Easter. That's probably not a bad thing to do. That's not biblical! Have you been with me in the sermon? Do you see that the Lord our God wants us paying attention to the great acts that He has done? And He wants us in our family to find time to tell the story. You don't want to do it in Lent? Fine. You know, if you grew up Catholic and there's no way you can use that without negative stuff coming in, then don't. But find time. Plan. Look at your calendar for next year and say, we are going to dent our life right here. We're going to put an interruption in our life. And we're going to spend 50 days thinking about resurrection. We're going to spend 30 days thinking about incarnation. Because those are the great acts of God. And we're going to tell the story of God as family. And it's going to influence everything that we do, and it's going to be very inconvenient, and we're going to do it anyway because we are Christian, and we want dents in the rhythms of our life so that we will live this way. What Bible can possibly undergird that? Oh, God said it. It's in Deuteronomy 16. He's saying, interrupt your life for me, lest you forget. Because most people don't wander into disobedience because they want to, and they're willful. Most of us wander into brokenness because we're forgetful, and we didn't mean it. And what God is saying is, remember, have a family that remembers. Do you want to be different? You want to be different from the brokenness you see out there? Do you want to raise these folks to be different from the brokenness you see out there? Then remember, 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 and dent your life so that you will remember. How are you doing with this? Do you live in a life rhythm that reminds you of God? Or are you just like them? No different. You know, we're creatures of habit, and you're going to live in habits. Let God shape your habits so that you tell each other the story, not by accident, but by design. Are you doing it? Is your life marked with the story of God? If you look at your life and you say, no, not me, not my family, but I want to be, let us know. We'll pray for you. And it's certainly possible that you came into this place bearing sin in your life that you want to put down and you can't seem to let it go. The church will pray for you. And it's also possible that there's somebody here who hasn't experienced this life-changing moment in time. And if you've not committed your life to Christ, no, He's already committed to you. He wants you for Himself. He's dying for you. He literally did, right? He wants you to come to Him. And if you haven't done that yet, let us know. If this morning you're subject to the invitation of God, why don't you come right now while we stand and